Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today we're going to be exploring a phenomenon from our source material that is, well, undeniably dark, but absolutely fascinating. We're looking at the psychology of the clean slate. Specifically, we're going to unpack the exact methods used to completely deconstruct human identity.
Okay, let's dive into this. How do institutions systematically strip away individual identity to rebuild it from scratch? I mean, it's a chilling thought, isn't it? We generally like to think of our own sense of self as this permanent, ironclad thing. But as the source material reveals, under the right, or actually scratch that, let's call them the clinically calculated conditions, human identity is startlingly malleable.
All right, moving into Section 1, the fragile psychological architecture. The experts in the text frame it exactly this way. Identity is a fragile psychological architecture. And this is an absolutely crucial reframe for our understanding today. Don't think of your identity as some solid, unbreakable block of stone. Think of it as an architecture. It's a building, right? It has a foundation, load-bearing walls, a roof. And just like any physical structure out there in the real world, if you apply enough pressure to the exact right foundational stress points, the entire edifice is going to collapse. And the blueprint for that demolition? It's shockingly systematic. Dismantling this architecture typically follows 3 core steps. Step 1 is controlled stress, Step 2, isolation, and Step 3, sensory disruption. So this isn't just about making someone uncomfortable, not at all. It is a clinical, highly calculated methodology meant to completely sever a person's connection to their past self, cut them off from their support systems, and entirely warp their perception of reality. Which brings us to Section 2, total institutional control. Now, here is a really vital concept to grasp. Total institutional control relies on a strict, categorical pattern of psychological coercion, rather than just random cruelty. From an impartial, purely clinical standpoint, the goal of these institutions isn't chaos. Chaos is unpredictable, and it doesn't give you reliable results. Instead, they rely on deeply methodical patterns of coercion, designed specifically to force total compliance. Literally, every single action has a deliberate psychological purpose. Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds using specific historical and modern examples, methods of identity demolition. We can clearly see the sheer spectrum of coercion used across time here. For instance, ancient Persia utilized long-term isolation to meticulously enforce conformity. Compare that to the modern, visceral horror of Syria's Sadnaya military prison, where new arrivals are subjected to overwhelming stress through brutal so-called welcome party beatings. It's a huge contrast. One method relies on years of a slow, quiet conditioning, while the other uses immediate, overwhelming physical and psychological shock to instantly break the new arrival's spirit, basically before they even have time to process their surroundings. Now, what's really interesting about this is looking back at that Persian method. Historical records show that the Persian emperors were strictly isolated and raised exclusively by eunuchs exactly until age 7. By entirely controlling their environment and completely isolating them from standard social structures during their most formative, foundational years, the institution guaranteed total, absolute conformity to the ruler's desired mindset. And this brilliantly illustrates how modern science approaches this exact demolition process in interrogation settings. Pride and ego down is a recognized interrogation technique that systematically attacks a suspect's sense of personal worth to force compliance. By methodically degrading a person's ego, mocking their achievements, and stripping away their self-respect, interrogators are, quite literally, hammering away at the load-bearing walls of that fragile psychological architecture we talked about earlier. Let's move into our final section. Section 4, achieving the clean slate.
So the crucial point to take away is this. The ultimate objective of all these methods, whether we're talking about the slow burn of isolation in antiquity, the immediate trauma of a military prison welcome party, or the calculated ego attacks of modern interrogation, the end goal is always to completely clear the psychological foundation. It's pretty simple. You just cannot build a brand new structure on top of an old one. The existing identity must be wiped totally clean to allow for a complete and total rebuild in the exact image of the institution. Well, we've definitely covered some intense ground today, but as we wrap up, I really want to leave you looking inward for a second. If identity is just a fragile architecture, what does it actually take to rebuild yours from scratch? Seriously, when you strip away the stress, the social isolation, the sensory inputs of your everyday life, what exactly remains of your foundation?
It's a deeply fascinating, if maybe slightly unsettling thing to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep seeking to understand the structures built around you.